many of you know, the coronavirus has many people scared. Parents are afraid to let their children out, and the country is being advised to quarantine. Americans in the early 1950s can relate. According to the CDC, the Center of Disease Control, and their article, What is Polio, of October 2019, over 150,000 cases of paralysis were reported in the early 1950s. Polio was a large and devastating epidemic. It's important to be informed about how it affected Americans because it played a huge part in American history and changed a lot of people's lives. Especially important right now because of what's going on with the coronavirus. Through research and my grandma's own personal experience, I'll explain what the virus is, how it affected American history, and eventually my grandma's story. The Mayo Clinic, an American academic medical center, in the article Polio, Symptoms and Causes of December 2017, explained polio as a contagious viral disease that in its most severe form causes nerve injury, leading to paralysis, difficulty breathing, and even death. The Mayo Clinic goes on to explain that there is two types of the virus. Non-paralytic, which is much like the flu, causing symptoms such as fever, sore throat, and coughing, and paralytic, which mimics the same symptoms as the non-paralytic, but goes on to cause loss of reflexes, severe muscle weakness, and flaccid paralysis, which causes the victim to not be able to move their limbs at all. Dr. Jane Seward, a medical epidemiologist for the CDC, explains in her article, Ruling Out Poliovirus of August 2014, that even though the limbs are paralyzed, the victims can still feel them because there's still sensory nerve, meaning that the victims can still feel everything in their limbs, but they won't be able to move them. The Mayo Clinic says that there is no cure for the virus, but supportive treatments called Sister Kenny treatments are used to help ease pain and make the most out of the limbs. Dr. Seward said that in 1952, 20,000 cases were reported, but 10 years later, fewer than 100 were. This is because of the development of vaccines in 1955. Now that you understand what the virus is, I will now explain how it impacted American history. The National Museum of American History, in their February 2005 article, The Polio Timeline, reported that the outbreak started in 1960. 6,000 deaths were reported and over 27,000 cases of paralysis. In 1929, President Franklin Roosevelt was diagnosed. In 1927, he then went on to make the Warm Springs Foundation in Georgia for rehabilitation for polio victims. In 1929, Philip Drinker and Lou Shaw developed the iron lung to assist victims with breathing. In 1953, Dr. Jonas Salk and his team developed the vaccine that 2 million children participated in the trials. In 1955, the success of the trials was announced and church bells rang around the country in celebration of the vaccine. Polio was a very scary virus that affected many people for many years, as I just explained. I will now go on to tell you how it personally affected my grandma, Ellen Pulaski. On September 19, 1946, both of my grandma's legs were paralyzed and she was diagnosed. She was transferred to the Minneapolis Central Hospital for 6 weeks in quarantine. She was then transferred to Fort Snelling and was released on May 18th. She used Sister Kenny sticks for treatment and for rehab. The contagious viral disease hurt many people with devastating effects. Its impact on history will be remembered, and especially by people who were personally affected like my grandma. This virus is very scary, just like how the coronavirus is very scary for us today. The polio virus was a very terrifying time. It changed many people's lives. Learning the history of it reminds people of how far medicine has come and how we can get over epidemics.